So for recovery workout number 5, we're going to look at hip mobility and hip flexor issues specifically. I hear a lot of complaints of people thinking that they have tight hip flexors. One thing I want to make sure is that your hip flexors are strong enough as well. Oftentimes when we feel like our muscles are tight, it can be a tension or a tone issue, really kind of exposing or masking the weakness that we have. So I'm going to take you through some hip strengthening and mobility exercises all in one. I want to introduce some strengthening exercises for your hip flexors, some things that can help you be more comfortable in this position. Oftentimes, hip flexor tightness or feelings of tightness are increases of tone that our body perceives as tightness or discomfort. So this first exercise here is an in-range hip flexion lift-off. Now, from this position, I'm going to try to lift my leg and just hold. Now you can see I'm working, I'm shaking a little bit. If you need to lean back to start, that's fine. Eventually, we would put something like a kettlebell underneath your foot and go back and forth over top. So the second exercise we're going to do is a single leg RDL with hip flexion to end. It's one of my favorite correctives. So what you're going to do, you're going to reach across the front hip. You're going to internally rotate over this front hip as you reach across. And then meet the bell with your knee, drive up, stand tall. With all of these exercises, this should be a weight that you can maintain and sustain this position. So we're not using the heavy weight that we would do for normal single leg deadlifts. We're using the lighter kettlebell. Our third exercise is going to be a mini band Psoas March. So I'm going to take the lightest mini band I have to start, put it around my feet. From here, driving one knee up and then the opposite. Now, if you feel good with this exercise, you can come up into this hip extended position and then drive through. So these next set of exercises are going to be hip flexor stretching with different arm drivers and body reaches. So what that means is, if I step forward right here, lunge position, I'm stretching my left hip flexor, my back hip flexor. An arm driver or a reach is when I then bring my body in certain positions to increase the stretch on the hip flexor. So what I'm going to do to start, I'm going to come out of the position each time. I'm going to step in, reach across, come back. Step in, reach across, and come back. We're going to do 5 like that. Then we're going to come up overhead. And again, you should use a PVC pipe instead of a TRX here. So we're going to reach forward, up overhead, and come back. So we've talked before about how I think that you should stretch the hip flexors. And in the previous video, I talked about it in the context of extension-based low back pain. Here I'm talking about it in the context of people who think that they have tight or painful hip flexors. Now, the first mistake I see everybody make with this is a huge arch in the back. We want to take that back arch out. So we're going to keep the ribs down, contract the glute, and slide forward slightly. Now that was about where I ended when we talked about this in terms of extension-based low back pain. The next step for hip flexor stretching, once we get into this position, is to then incorporate the drivers and the reaches that we did from the standing. So we can reach and rotate over our front leg. We can reach up overhead. One of my keys here is I want everything in line. So if my back leg is externally rotated, meaning my foot is coming in that way, I'm not putting the hip flexor on tension, I'm not stretching it. If my front leg is all the way out like this, I'm letting my hips torque to the side and rotate, I'm not stretching my hip flexor efficiently. So before you start to push yourself all the way forward, check and make sure that all of these things are in line.